Hezbollah continue to fire at Israel over the weekend from north to south. And just before this broadcast began, we had incoming missiles from Iran to the south of Israel, and there are reports at this hour of missile fragments impacting a site in the south. No injuries have been reported so far. And we also have in the north, reportedly 2 impact sites in the north from Hezbollah, the Iranian terror proxies. 8 people are reportedly injured. Again, all this happening just in the last couple of minutes, and so we will continue to update if there are any new developments on that front. In the meantime, on Friday, an Iranian ballistic missile fragment came incredibly close to destroying the Western Wall in the Jewish quarter and the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the Muslim quarter in the Old City of Jerusalem. Sirens sounded and an explosion was seen over the Holy City shortly after. We have some, I think, visuals of that and a volunteer medic who was at the site. Let's take a listen.
Parked my ambulance at C1, City of David, and suddenly we heard the alarm. I did what we were told to do, which is to lie down. We have to get a distance from the car. I laid down, and then I put my hands on my head, and then I looked up, and suddenly I saw a cannonball just following.
And not only in Jerusalem, but throughout central Israel, sirens blared on Friday and Saturday morning, sending millions into bomb shelters multiple times. There were no casualties reported, but 3 people were lightly injured. And a missile fragment also hit a kindergarten in a city south of Tel Aviv, and several homes were damaged as well throughout the center due to the missile fire. Now, IDF Chief of Staff of the Home Front Command was at the site of the kindergarten. Let's take a look.
We are here in Saturday morning. It's the weekend in Israel. Most of the people are in their homes, but you can see here the penetration of a bomb, a cluster bomb, into this kindergarten. Fortunately, there weren't any kids in this garden, but just imagine what would have happened if kids were here playing, staying during their daily routine. Once again, we see that our enemies aim their targets to civilian population. They try to kill and to impact as much as they can.
And earlier on Friday, Iran also launched an attack against an oil refinery in Kuwait. Meanwhile, Defense Minister Israel Katz said today that the attacks against the Iranian regime will be stepped up significantly this coming week. He made these remarks during a security assessment with senior army officials. Let's take a listen.
השבוע עוצמת התקיפות שיבצעו צה"ל וצבא ארצות הברית נגד משטר הטרור האיראני ונגד התשתיות עליהן הוא נשען תעלה מדרגה באופן משמעותי, והמערכה בהובלת נשיא ארצות הברית דונלד טראמפ וראש ממשלת ישראל בנימין נתניהו תימשך. אנחנו נחושים להוסיף ולהוביל את המתקפה נגד משטר הטרור האיראני, לערוף את ראשי מפקדיו ולסכל את יכולותיו האסטרטגיות עד להסרת כל איום ביטחוני מעל מדינת ישראל ומעל האינטרסים של ארצות הברית באזור.
And at this hour, we're just receiving reports of yet another siren, Home Front Command early warning alert to the south of Israel. This is the 7th time since midnight that Iran has launched missiles at the south of Israel. And joining us now to discuss the latest here in Israel is JNS senior editor Ruti Bloom. Ruti, always wonderful to have you on.
Thanks so much, Lidar. It's always great to be here. I just want to say something that's also relevant to what's going on with all of us.
Go ahead.
You said in the beginning that it is 7 p.m. in Israel and 12 p.m. in New York. Actually, it's 1 p.m. in New York because the United States went on daylight savings time and we haven't yet until next week.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm not saying that just to correct you. I'm saying because we are so confused about what time of day it is yes. because of this war. You're getting up in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. Someone said to me, how many did you have last night? How many times did I run to the bomb shelter? I'm so confused. We sleep 2 hours here, 2 hours there. So it's not surprising that you would get that hour confused as well.
Absolutely. I completely agree with what you're saying. It's very sort of war routine, we call it, but really the days kind of blend together, the hours blend together, absolutely. And so I do want to ask you, because we are 3 weeks into this war, and of course we've seen a lot of incredible accomplishments from the United States, from Israel, but we're still seeing so much rocket and missile fire incoming. I mean, we just saw these missile impacts we have now just in the past couple of minutes in the south and the north, and of course what we saw over the weekend in Jerusalem. I want to talk about that for a second. I mean, what do you make of this hit in the old city?
Okay, well, first of all, so many people were saying it's very interesting. It's interesting if the Iranians are aiming at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, for example, because, and it would make sense, because although, I don't mean the Iranians, I mean the Iranian regime, because it would make sense, because though the regime is, in which he indicated that though it's true that there's still a missile arsenal in the hands of the Iranian regime, they no longer have the ability to manufacture new ones. So I think what we're seeing, and I'm no military expert, okay, but what we're seeing is it's true that 2 million Israelis have to run to the bomb shelters all the time, but actually they might launch only 2 missiles and then the whole country is in bomb shelters. The difference between these missiles and previous ones is that these are cluster munitions. So what happens is if they're intercepted in the air, then they spread out, and what we call missile fragments, well, you see the pictures on your screen of that kindergarten. That's a fragment? No, that's a real bomb. And what happens with cluster bombs is they spread out and begin, so it's not just shrapnel, it's an actual bomb that hits those places. Yeah. So, but it's true that they're firing fewer missiles every day, but several times, and it makes it look as though we just are never going to end with this.
Absolutely. I mean, me personally, we've gone into bomb shelters over the night and throughout the day on Friday. I lost count of how many sirens we had or how many alerts we had. And I do want to ask you a little bit, because I want our viewers to really understand sort of what's happening in Israel. And you're doing an incredible job of explaining this. And maybe you can expand a little bit on what the atmosphere or the feeling is like in Jerusalem, in Israel, especially following the hit on the old city of Jerusalem. I know a lot of Israelis really took that, were really surprised that a missile was able to penetrate into the old city. That's sort of seen as forbidden territory, if you will. But as you mentioned, it seems almost as though the Iranians are purposefully targeting these holy sites.
Oh, for sure. Now, I can't tell you exactly what's going on in Jerusalem because I'm in Tel Aviv, but we have been getting, and Tel Aviv has been really hit hard with a lot of sirens. So is Jerusalem, by the way, especially this weekend. It just went on and on and on. Now, but here's the weird thing about it. The mood is very cheerful. There have been reports all weekend about how we rate high on the International Happiness Index. What I can see from where I live and in the bomb shelters, the neighbors are getting to know one another, and there's a lot of cheer. Earlier today, when there were sirens in the south and in Beersheba, we saw all these young people out having beers and then waiting, and then as soon as they had a siren, they went into the nearest bomb shelter. What's also interesting is there's a lot of joking about what's going on here. We just had a big rainstorm with a lot of thunder, and all these WhatsApps are going, oh my God, that sounded like a missile attack, that thunder. And, I found myself, as soon as I saw that, they said, okay, we're identifying a missile barrage from Iran. I put on my boots and I put my umbrella next to the door. This is the kind of thing, and you'd think that what would I care about rain? But I mean, this is how we're living. You say, oh, okay, any minute now I'm going to have to run outside and down to the next building, and it's pouring outside. So, I mean, we're living this very strange reality. It's true, we're used to it. We're used to it and sick of it. It's such a mixture. And I have to say, especially people with young children, just, having to wake them up in the middle of the night and rush them out. So many people are putting their children to sleep in the safe rooms if they have one, or staying with family members who have one, so that the kids can at least stay in one place throughout the night.
Absolutely. And we do know that, for example, as we saw with the kindergarten in Rishon, I mean, it was hit on a Saturday, but schools are out. They've been out since the beginning of Operation Roaring Lion. So 3 weeks now, kids have not been in schools. We've seen a couple of areas in Israel where children have returned to school, but the most of Israel kids are still learning from Zoom. And in just a couple days, we're set to go out to Passover holiday for the children. School is set to go into recess for about 2 weeks. And we know that Passover is coming up soon, a little less than 2 weeks away. Do you see, though, an end in sight to this war? Do you think Israelis will be holding their Passover Seders in the bunker?
Oh, absolutely. I do not anticipate. Listen, Passover is, I don't know, a little more than a week away. I cannot imagine that this will be over within a week, because also, unlike the United States, Israel, we're actually fighting on more than one front, because we're also engaged in Lebanon. And so, when there's not a missile from Iran, there's some from Lebanon. I think that people are going to celebrate the holiday for sure. The real trouble with it is not that, because as long as you're near a bomb shelter or a safe room, that's okay. I would say the bigger problem is driving somewhere, if your family lives far away, is that people are hesitant, because if you're hit with a siren and you're on a highway, you've got to get out of your car and you've got to find a place, get far away from your car and lie down on the pavement. And it's one thing if you're by yourself, which is scary enough, but to get children out of car seats and also lie them down on the highway, it's very unpleasant. I've done it. It's not fun. So I imagine that many people are not going to be going as far on the holiday as they might normally have done.
So, Luti, I do want to stop you there, because I'm getting a lot of reports that there are a number of impact sites in the south of Israel. We know of a couple of sites where there's fragments or submunitions that hit, and we know that there was one structure that collapsed and one person was injured as a result of that collapse. And there's also more reports coming in of injuries, light injuries, but about 8 or 12 people have been injured so far. I'm seeing that there are about 12 sites where we've had sort of missile fragments, one building or one structure being hit, and we also know 20 people now is the update have been lightly injured from this latest barrage, just as we've been speaking. So that's an update right now that we've received at this hour. Now, I do want to ask you, because we're saying that this is clearly going to last a little bit longer than a week, but we've heard the Trump administration laying out its goals for this war. And as you just mentioned, Israel is bearing the brunt of this war. We are receiving missiles night and day. But what is Israel's end goal here? I mean, looking at it from the Israeli perspective, what does Netanyahu hope to accomplish at the end of the day, at the end of this war?
He hopes to accomplish a few things. Key among them is to facilitate the overthrow of the regime in Tehran by the Iranian people. And in order to do that, the top leaders, the Ayatollahs, the head of the Basij militias, the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, all of those one by one, and also headquarters and missile factories, and also the nuclear site.
Luti, I do just want to stop you for 1 second, because I see that we now have the footage of the latest hit. So this is a really dramatic footage that we're seeing right now on the screen of a hit just moments ago, just as we were speaking, in the south of Israel. So we see that missile impacting. It's unclear. We know that one building, one structure has collapsed, one person injured from that, and there are about 20 people altogether injured from this latest salvo, and we see visuals of that coming in now on the screen. And of course, we will continue to update as these events unfold, because this is all unfolding now in real time as we're live. And so we will continue, of course, to update as soon as we receive any more updates. This is sort of an active scene right now, an active impact scene. We have Magen David Adom, United Hatzalah, security services all making their way now to the scene, treating wounded. And so we'll, of course, update as soon as we have more information on that. And Ruti, now back to you.
Okay, so I mentioned the goal in Iran, but then you see Iran, because it's the head of the octopus. I mean, don't forget, this is now 2.5 years since the war in Gaza began, since October 7th, 2023. Israelis have been living this reality for much longer than the United States. Okay, now, and also we're playing defense and offense simultaneously, because we have missiles lobbed at us. The Americans are not experiencing that. And that's not to put anybody down, because President Trump, I really think, has been spectacular. This has been a great joint operation. Having said that, Israel is bearing the brunt, because we're also trying to fend off missiles while taking out terrorists and all. And then we have Lebanon. We now have ground troops in Lebanon. And even if the goals are met in Iran, which I don't know how long that's going to take, and President Trump keeps giving, saying one thing and the other. He's not really giving mixed messages. He's saying, I'm not letting you know, because I'm not letting the enemy know. But even if that ends in Iran, which will, of course, affect the whole region, we still have to take care of Hezbollah in Lebanon and push Hezbollah far away. We would really like to eliminate every last Hezbollah terrorist, but that's not very realistic. What we need to do is destroy their capabilities and push them way farther away from the Israeli border.
Absolutely. And Ruti, we have another update, unfortunately. So we have reports now from MADA that there were 20 people who have been injured in this latest missile attack, 12 different sites throughout the city in the south. And among the injured is a 10-year-old boy who is, they say, moderately to severely injured. So a 10-year-old boy injured in this latest salvo. So really unfortunate news at this hour. And we'll continue, of course, to update. We saw that impact. I mean, that looked to be, a direct impact or a pretty big fragment, if not a direct impact. And we know that a building has collapsed, and there are, in addition, about 12 sites throughout the south that were impacted. And so 20 people injured, among them a 10-year-old boy. So that's the news. That's the latest at this hour. As you said, Israel bearing the brunt of this Iranian attacks. Of course, the war still continuing 3 weeks in. Ruti Bloom, thank you so much for joining us tonight for this special broadcast. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much, Lida.
And in the salvo earlier today, on Saturday, Iran used a cluster bomb once again. This is a missile, for those that do not know, that essentially breaks into numerous smaller submunitions, shooting out in various directions. And not only a cluster bomb, but the Wall Street Journal reported on Friday, citing multiple U.S. officials, that Iran also fired 2 intermediate-range ballistic missiles, or IRBMs, at the Diego Garcia base in the Indian Ocean, but failed to hit the joint U.S.-UK military base. Now, according to the report, this marks the first operational use of IRBMs and a significant attempt to reach beyond the Middle East. Diego Garcia sits about 2,500 miles from Iran, which implies the regime's missiles have a much greater range than Tehran has previously acknowledged. Iran's foreign minister had said only last month that the maximum range of their missiles was around 1,250 miles, about half the distance. Now, joining us to discuss the Islamic regime in Iran's missile capabilities is Tal Inbar, a senior research fellow at the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance, an expert on Iran's ballistic missile program. Tal, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So this seems to have taken many by surprise, that Iran is capable of launching missiles at such a distance, nearly reaching the Diego Garcia base. I mean, what do we know about their intermediate range ballistic missiles?
Well, first of all, we have to still wait for an official confirmation about this incident. because we all rely on a single source, the Wall Street Journal, and still there are a lot of unknowns in that regard. So we know for years that Iran is lying about the range of its ballistic missiles. Especially this is the case with the Khorramshahr missile, which is an Iranian version of a North Korean missile, which in turn is a new version of a Soviet submarine-launched ballistic missile. So even the Soviet missiles from the 1960s, late 60s, has a range of 3,000 kilometers with much fewer fuel than Iran's Khorramshahr. So it could be that the missiles, the story will come out true, the missiles might be Khorramshahr missiles. And there is another possibility that the IRGC space program developed its own satellite launch vehicles named KM-100. And this is almost, I think, the direct path for IRBM and even further away towards the ambitions of at least some people in Iran to develop intercontinental missiles.
Now, how many IRBMs are they believed to possess? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but these missiles also have the capability then to reach Europe.
Well, we don't know the exact number because if it's Khorramshahr, and we are seeing the use of this missile throughout the past 3 weeks against Israel and against other countries in the regions. So many believe that the Khorramshahr missile is quite expensive and sophisticated, and Iran possesses an arsenal of just several tens of those missiles, and many missiles were supposed to be destroyed during June 2025. So I believe that the number is considerably higher. Nevertheless, there are a lot of technical obstacles that Iran should overcome if the Diego Garcia is a target. So it's not just about reducing the weight of the warhead of the missile, it's also guidance and control issues, hit issues, because the longer the range, the more the hit the re-entry vehicle is suffering during the re-entry phase to the atmosphere. So it is not sure what Iran did. And I'm watching every single video that Iran is airing after it's fired the missiles. So now we have 72 what they called waves in the True Promise 4 operation. So Iran didn't acknowledge anything regarding this firing of 2 alleged ballistic missiles to the Diego Garcia base. So it is quite hard to tell what happened here until we will know more details, and what is the possible numbers of missiles that Iran could fire against this base and against some targets in Europe.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to ask in general what the state of their program, their missile program is today, because we heard Prime Minister Netanyahu say a few days ago that they no longer have the ability to produce new missiles. I mean, is that also your assessment?
It's a trivial assessment because every day and every night Iran is under attack by the US and by Israel. And just imagine that your studio is now under attack, and the near streets will have a lot of bombardments. So it's just understandable that people don't come to work. So Iran is relying on the current stockpiles that were produced before the war.
And how quickly can they rebuild their missile program, though?
Well, this is a question of the will of the Iranian regime, the budget, and the time. So with enough budget and a strong will, they could rebuild the industry, even though there are some parts and elements of the program that are under international regulations and restrictions. But nevertheless, Iran successfully managed to get a lot of banned items throughout the years. So it depends, because I saw some photographic evidence of several of the sites, that were almost completely demolished. So actually, Iran should build almost from scratch the capability of producing more ballistic missiles. So this is a task not for weeks or months, but for several years. But it depends on the budget. We have enough budget and enough help from outside, and one candidate could be North Korea, another one could be China, perhaps some Russian assistance as well. So this time frame could be shortened.
Israel, we are still feeling the effects. I mean, we may only see one missile launched at a time, certainly less than sort of these doomsday scenarios that we had of thousands of missiles, but it certainly is enough to disrupt the lives, not to mention the sleep of millions of Israelis. And just at the beginning of this broadcast, we saw an impact in the south of Israel. A 10-year-old boy was injured. Another 40-year-old woman now, it was also moderately injured. That's the latest update that we've received at this hour. And we know about 20 people were also injured in this latest missile attack. So how much longer can the regime keep this up, keep firing these missiles at Israel? You know, we've seen just in the south of Israel alone, 7 sirens, 7 alerts just since midnight last night.
So to answer the question, we need to know the exact number of ballistic missiles still in Iranian hands. But for example, from today, we saw a video that Iran put on the social media in a broad daylight, no cloud cover. And this is the way they chose to use their weapons, not for large barrages of missiles, but 1, 2, 3 at a time. And this is a war of attrition against Israel and the other countries in the Gulf. And I think that Iran shifted the effort from the UAE and Bahrain to Israel in the last few days. So again, until Iran will fire the last missile, it could be quite a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. And not just the missile, I mean, you said we would need to know the missiles, but is there any kind of estimate as to how many missiles they still have, despite the United States and Israel constantly attacking their storage sites, their ballistic missiles program? Is there any kind of estimate that you can give us as to how many missiles you think the regime still has?
There are a lot of estimations and a lot of guesstimations. So I cannot go into my estimation because it's as good as yours. So it could be in the hundreds of missiles. It could be some more missiles in underground facilities that were attacked, meaning that Iran at the moment cannot use the missiles inside because the entry and the exit are obstructed and blocked by the bombardments. But nevertheless, the missiles could be intact underground. And Iran is doing a lot and pay a lot of attention to try to pull out some missiles from those sites. So it could be several hundreds, to say the least.
And it's not just a question of the missiles themselves, but also of the missile launchers. What can you tell us about their capabilities in terms of the missile launchers?
Well, first, Iran chose to build their own launchers. And this is, by the way, was a very good strategic decision by Iran not to rely on a special trucks with a lot of capabilities, mobility, and so on. And every truck could be used to move the missiles, and all the elements of the launch vehicles are produced in Iran. Nevertheless, it is understandable that if you, for example, build 1,000 missiles, you don't build 1,000 launchers. So the ratio between the launch vehicles and the missiles themselves is not known. Not publicly known at least. And we know that in June 2025, Iran was able to repair some of the damaged launch vehicles. So it is a choke point in some essence, but still we can see the evidence is here, because every time a missile is fired towards Israel or towards other countries in the Gulf, That means that Iran is using a launcher. So there are still enough launchers to keep the current pace of firing the missiles.
Absolutely. Tal, Inbal, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your unique expertise.
Thank you.
And continuing on to U.S. and Israeli achievements in Iran in Operations Epic Fury and Roaring Lion. The United States has launched an attack on the Natanz uranium enrichment facility on Saturday. This, according to Iran's Tasnim news agency. Israel has said it was not involved in the strike. According to the report, no radioactive leaks occurred and residents near the site were not at risk. And following this report, the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, issued a statement confirming that there was no increase in off-site radiation levels. The agency said it is looking into the report. Meanwhile, in Operation Roaring Lion, the IDF on Saturday said it hit dozens of Iranian terror regime targets during a wide-scale strike sortie in Tehran. Among the sites struck, a central IRGC compound utilized for the production and development of ballistic missile components, a missile production components storage facility, a compound belonging to the Ministry of Defense responsible for producing missiles fuels, and a ballistic missiles components production site. So Israel hitting the ballistic missile program hard this weekend. And on Friday, U.S. President Donald Trump told reporters that the U.S. and Israel are doing so well militarily that there is simply no one left to talk to in Iran's leadership. Let's listen to his comments.
They don't know what's happening. Their Navy's gone, their Air Force is gone, their anti-aircraft is all gone, it's all gone, their radar is all gone, their leaders are all gone, the next set of leaders are all gone, and the next set of leaders are mostly gone. And now nobody wants to be a leader over there anymore. We're having a hard time. We want to talk to them, and there's nobody to talk to. We have nobody to talk to. And you know what? We like it that way.
And U.S. President Donald Trump also had choice words for his NATO allies, calling them cowards for failing to join the war and helping to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Trump issuing a tweet on social media, on his Truth Social, saying that the Strait of Hormuz will have to be guarded and policed by other nations who use it, stating that the United States does not. And earlier on Friday, President said that his NATO allies were cowards. And he said that without the U.S., NATO is a paper tiger, saying they didn't want to join the fight to stop a nuclear-powered Iran. Now that the fight is won militarily, they really just complain about high oil prices, but don't want to help open the strait, saying it would be easy for them to do so with so little risk, and says the United States will remember. And despite the president's comments about winding down the war, a new report from CBS says the Pentagon has made preparations for deploying U.S. ground forces into Iran. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt played down this report, saying that it's the job of the Pentagon to make preparations, does not mean that the president has made a decision, saying that as of now he is not planning to send ground troops. Nevertheless, the report and a second report from Reuters say that there are U.S. troops en route to the Middle East. And speaking of ground troops, Israel has sent ground troops into Lebanon to continue dismantling Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure, though said this falls short of a full ground invasion of Lebanon. On Saturday, Israeli troops engaged several Hezbollah terrorists in southern Lebanon, and the terrorists were killed by airstrikes and tank fire that provided support for ground troops. The IDF also said it hit numerous Hezbollah targets in Beirut over the weekend. So far, the IDF says it has killed nearly 600 Hezbollah terrorists. Around 200 were members of the Radwan forces and struck over 2,000 terror targets, including hundreds of missile launchers. All this while a potential ceasefire draft is reportedly on the table. But the IDF is showing no signs of slowing down its attacks against the Iranian terror proxy. And so joining us now to discuss the latest with Iran, with its terror proxy Hezbollah, and all of the latest developments in the region are Colonel Rich Outzen, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, and Brigadier General Yosef Cooper-Wasser from JISS and former IDF intelligence. Thank you both for joining us this evening. A lot of developments here in Israel and a lot of security developments happening over the weekend, so let's get right into it. And I'm being told right now that we have just some new footage of the strike that hit in the south of Israel. So let's just take a look at that right now. We see interceptor missile clearly missing the Iranian missile, and we see that strike, very, very dramatic footage coming out from Israel at this hour. And so, Rich, I do want to turn to you. We're seeing these visuals on the screen that we just saw right now, where we're hearing of a 10-year-old boy that's been injured. U.S. President Donald Trump is saying that the United States is considering winding down the war. But so far, the regime is intact. Iran continues to launch missiles at Israel, and not just Israel, throughout the Middle East and beyond. So what do you make of President Trump's comments of this potential ending the war?
Well, it's good to be with you, and much respect to General Cooper Wasser, who was still serving, I think, when I was an attaché in Israel. So good to be with you both. Look, there's a tremendous amount of political pressure on President Trump, both from within his own party that we've seen on the far right edge of the MAGA movement, people who don't think this is a war we should fight and that think that it's essentially an Israeli war that we've been dragged into. That's not my view, obviously, but also on the left, people who are actually quite supportive of anti-Israel forces, and there's been some protests from, and I don't think Trump puts much value on these, to be honest with you, but there is this idea that the U.S. doesn't have a plan, and that this is a war that was fought for personal reasons. Many of the same things that were trotted out against previous presidents, from Reagan through Bush, for military actions. So I think he's responding to some of that with this constant saying, like, it's almost done, we're almost there. But I think we need to pay attention to this strike that was attempted on Diego Garcia. The idea that the Iranians had assured their own people and international negotiators, oh, no, we don't have anything. We have no ambitions for mid-range missiles or intercontinental ballistic missiles. This is all about, our axis of resistance and self-defense, has been given the lie by this. The fact that the Iranians are attempting to launch missiles against Diego Garcia that could also potentially hit targets in Central Europe and throughout the depths of the Middle East and into Europe shows exactly the reason and the rationale that the Trump administration is following in the prosecution of this war. So I would say that he has to do certain things, juggling like all politicians do in the midst of a war, to say this is not a forever war. It's not going to go on forever. But the idea that both the nuclear program, the proxy project, and this ballistic missile program, which is far more advanced than Trump's enemies would have admitted 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago. He has to see this through. And I think he knows that, and he's signaling that through his security actions, including the possibility of taking Kharg Island or seizing control of the Straits of Hormuz directly. This regime, this Iranian regime, cannot be allowed to continue the development of these capabilities to strike at the heart of Europe and NATO and the United States ultimately. So I think that's what he's pursuing, and the talks about ending it sooner are more about juggling domestic political dissent.
I want to pose the same question to you, what you make of Trump's announcement that the war may be winding down from here in Israel. Does it look at all like the war is winding down?
Well, from here in Israel, it doesn't look like that. We are ready, as was mentioned before, to a long war, that if necessary. And the point is that we have managed to, so far, to inflict very heavy damage on the Iranian strategic assets and on the Iranian regime. Every day that goes by, we inflict more damage. We just saw the footage of some of the attacks on the ballistic missiles production facilities. Yeah. And storages, and every day that goes by, we manage to hit them harder. But that said, we have four elements in the war that we don't have a clear answer to. How do we finish the war with them? One is the issue of the Hormuz Straits. We cannot finish the war when the Hormuz Straits are closed. That's not a way to finish the war. If we are to win this war, the Hormuz Straits have to be open, and it's not an easy task. It's a very complicated task because there are mines and there are missiles around the Hormuz Straits, and there are the self-run automatic vessels that are supposed to hit, not unmanned vessels that are supposed to hit those vessels, those ships going through the Hormuz Straits. It's a very complicated task, and yes, the Americans are getting ready all the time to handle this problem, and they do a lot in order to deal with the threat, but there's still a big issue. The second issue is what's going to happen with the nuclear material. The 450 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% that are hidden somewhere in Isfahan. It's if you really want to make sure that Iran is not going to have the capability to produce nuclear weapons in the future, you have to deal with this stockpile of highly enriched uranium. And it's not only this; they have a lot of uranium enriched to 10 to 20%, and to 3.67%. All of that has to be going out of Iran, and you have to make sure that they are not going to enrich uranium. And they are building. We all know that in the Pickaxe Mountain, they are building a facility that would serve in order to enrich uranium, to develop new centrifuges and then to enrich uranium. We cannot let that happen. This is a big issue as well. And the third problem is the ballistic missiles. They still launch missiles, and as Rich said, these are missiles that we were not supposed to know that they have them, although we probably knew they have them, but we were not supposed to know that. And now you have these new elements, and the cluster bombs that are on those warheads of the missiles launched towards Israel is another problem, because it makes it more difficult to shoot them down, to intercept them, because they are splitting into the smaller bombs before the interception. So it's so we still have to deal with all those capabilities that the Iranians have. We are making a lot of progress, but we are not yet there. And the fourth issue is the issue of weakening the regime as a governing body, hitting the security forces and hitting the leadership. This is also a very demanding task. And the lesson learned from all of that is that if you are going to finish this war when you are a winner, and everybody knows that we won, we need more time. Time is of the essence. And the political considerations Rich alluded to are, of course, important. But once you enter a war like that, you need to know that you have got to have the patience and the endurance that are necessary, and the resilience that is necessary in order to win this war. In Israel, you have all of that. Israel is ready to fight a long war as long as necessary in order to settle all those four issues, to make sure that the Iranians are defeated.
All right, so Yossi, you made a lot of very interesting points there. Rich, 4 points, 4 issues that are still on the table, according to Yossi. Now, I do want to talk about the first one, the most pressing one, it seems, for President Trump, and that is the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump has really shown a major spotlight as well on his NATO allies in dealing with this issue, with the Strait of Hormuz. Are they going to join this war? I mean, what is the latest on their involvement here?
Well, they're making noise about it, right? I read today that there was a statement put out by a number of European countries about the willingness to participate in actions to open the Straits of Hormuz. I want to throw a parallel here, a historical parallel, with the Montreux Treaty that governs the Turkish Straits, right? So Turkey, which has never been, even during their War of Independence, to eject the British, the French, the Russians, and others that were occupying their country, they were never a systemically anti-Western power, at least not Ataturk's movement, right? So you can make arguments about the Ottomans before that. But Ataturk always essentially wanted to be part of the Western system. He held that up as a goal for the Turkish Republic and its founding in 1922, 1923. 13 years later, after the Straits had been a major, with the Battle of Gallipoli, which we've recently celebrated, at least on the Turkish side, sort of the denouement of that battle. But all of that, all of the anger, the vitriol, the strategic conflict over the Straits was put to rest, in a sense, with the Montreux Convention in 1936, which gives the Turks the right only to deny access to combatants in times of war. And other than that, everyone has a right to civilian shipping. And that's an important set of straits that includes Romania, Ukraine, and the Caucasus. Now let's apply that logic to the Straits of Hormuz. This is important to Qatar, but also to Saudi Arabia, to Oman, to many others who ship through that area, and not just to the Iranians. So the fact that the Iranians are treating this, which is not an internal waterway, as if it's their right to squeeze it off and to squeeze it on, is sort of ridiculous with regards to the international freedom of movement on the seas, which is a major strategic interest of the United States. So I would say with regards to Hormuz, it has to be, at this stage of the war, now that we've traveled this far, it has to be one of the war goals for the United States and Europe. This is less probably important for Israel, that doesn't get a lot through the Straits of Hormuz. And frankly, it's more for Europe than it is for the United States. There needs to be a new regime, a new understanding with regards to transit through the Straits of Hormuz. We cannot live through this again, where a terrorist regime in Tehran exercises de facto control over who passes through this international strait. So I think the Europeans are waking up to this. I think Trump is goading them into that by saying, hey, look, we get our oil from elsewhere for the most part, but Europe, this is for you. This is for your energy security. And I think we're at an interesting stage. And to answer your question, I think I see promising signs from Europe. They're starting to wake up to the fact that we're not going to do it for them. And if the Iranians squeeze them, and the Iranians can hit them now with their own ballistic missiles, maybe Europe needs to get involved in helping to arrange the security of this region on a more rational basis.
Europe and the United States' European allies and Israel's allies as well, very, very disappointing throughout this entire operation. Now, Rich, I do just want to ask you another question, because we're hearing reports that, you know, over 2,000 U.S. Marines are on their way to the Middle East. Now, the White House has played this down, saying that the Pentagon is simply preparing a plan, but the president has not decided. But what do you make of this? I mean, does it seem to you that the U.S. is sort of laying the foundation, or maybe slowly preparing the American public for a potential ground invasion?
Well, let's be specific. You know, a ground invasion a la Iraq in 2003 or something like that is certainly not on the table. However, there's other examples of when the United States has gone in briefly on the ground, even in Venezuela this year when we picked up Maduro, for a brief operation for a strategic purpose. Now, if the strategic purpose is to deny the Iranians the ability to export oil through Kharg Island, or to deny them the firing sites around the Straits of Hormuz, that could be done in a relatively short period of time. Now, there's a drone threat. There's a lot of operational complications to that. But I think that Trump has laid the gun on the table, right? So he's basically telling the Iranians, you start to negotiate on some of the things that are most important to us now, or we will do this, and we will go for the jugular. And the jugular in this case is both the Straits of Hormuz control and also the ability to export their own oil. And we'll export the oil through Kharg. We can do that. We haven't destroyed the facilities. Now, is it Chekhov's gun? Is it the situation where you put the gun on the table and the gun must be fired? We'll see. But I think what Trump is doing is less signaling the American people to prepare for an extended ground operation, because that's not in the cards. I think he's signaling to the Iranians that we're about to do remove your one or two most potent cards, the oil and the ability to fire at the Straits of Hormuz, even at the risk of some, we're going to have to defend our Marines if they go in on the ground there, and I think we've got the tools to do it. But I think it's hardball. It's Trumpian hardball, and I hope they're paying attention in Tehran.
Absolutely. And Yossi, turning now to you, we've heard this past week from President Trump, from Israeli officials, that U.S. and Israeli objectives for this war are not the same. And as Rich just pointed out, for example, the Strait of Hormuz, it's more of an American, European issue. Now, should President Trump decide to end this war, perhaps prematurely, would Israel be able to continue on its own?
Well, let me say a few words before that on the issue of the adherence of the Iranians to international law. By launching cluster bombs on the population, they already breach any law. And of course, about what they do in the home states is also against the law. But they don't believe that the law applies to them. They were lying all the way to the bomb. It's they are signatories of the NPT. They ignore the NPT. It's we are playing with a player that doesn't respect the rules of the game right from the beginning. So we cannot complain about that. And another thing that we can learn from that is that how big the threat is from Iran to everybody, not only to the United States or Israel, but to the Europeans, as Rich mentioned, and to the Gulf states. And everybody is should be worried about the fact that the regime in Iran is going to stay in power. We have to make sure that this is coming to an end. Now, as for the question of the difference between Israel and the United States, Basically, we have the same goals. We want a change of regime eventually to be happening in Iran by the people of Iran. We are not going to make it happen by ourselves, neither we nor the Americans, but we want to see it happening. We definitely want to make sure that Iran doesn't have the capability to produce nuclear weapons. This is joint. We want to make sure that they cannot threaten their neighbors with ballistic missiles and definitely not threaten Israel. These are all common goals to Israel and to the United States. The Hormuz Strait is something specific that is less of concern to Israel and more for concern for the Europeans than even the Americans. But it's an issue of the war that the United States has to handle. What happens if President Trump decided at a certain point that enough is enough? I guess we shall stop too. We can, by the way, we can continue fighting on our own. Let's all remember what happened in June 2025. We started it on our own and we fought for 10 days on our own. And we could have fought more. We were ready to fight more, and it was the order of President Trump that stopped us. We can fight on our own, but we enjoy fighting together with the United States. We are much more powerful. We hit already much more than 10,000 targets in this war. We can accomplish the goals we have to accomplish. We have to be innovative in the way we do that, so that we should not need a lot of time. We need more time. But if we handle the situation properly, it might be less time than what we should be prepared for. And we have to make sure that the Iranians believe that we are prepared for a long war, because if they believe that we are trying to find a solution that and end the war, that would mean that they are already winning. We cannot afford that.
Now, Rich, I do want to ask you another question that we've heard today. We've heard reports that the Islamic regime, the leaders that are still alive, are now threatening the United States, threatening vacation, tourist destinations, as spring break is just around the corner in the United States. The United States clearly on high alert for that. What can you tell us about that, and how serious of a threat is this to the United States?
Well, we've already seen some instances of domestic terrorism related. There was a shooting here in Virginia at an ROTC class that killed an Army lieutenant colonel that was executed by an immigrant from Sierra Leone who had oddly enough, an allegiance to ISIS, but was doing this in protest of the war against Iran. So it makes strange bedfellows. But there's been other attacks by a Hezbollah-related supporter against the synagogue in Michigan. There's this sort of concatenation of far radical left violence, the sort of Antifa variety, along with sort of generically anti-Western thought that comes from either the Iranian support of Iran or support of the Palestinian cause, which, by the way, that's complicated. I also myself have a lot of Palestinian friends, and I'm a two-state supporter, but the Hamas version of that and the violent overthrow of the West that's implied by that, and the violent overthrow of Israel, that's all conflated right now. So we have this radical red-green alliance, if you will, between the anti-Western Islamists and the anti-Western leftists. And that is a constant cauldron of potential terror attacks in the United States, and we've seen some of that played out. So Iran, in some case, probably has, my assessment, sleeper cells, people that because we had an uncontrolled border for 4 years under the Biden administration. 11 million, 12 million people came through. I, as a security practitioner and military veteran, assume that the Chinese, the Venezuelans, the Iranians were all sending people in to prepare for when they would need to do attacks in case of war. So it would be very naive to assume that the Iranians can't conduct some of these attacks directly. But honestly, based on the numbers, it's probably more dangerous from these lone wolf or copycat attacks coming from the far left and from the sort of naively sort of pro-Iranian folks that are on some of our college campuses in some of our towns. So yeah, it's a very serious threat. The Trump administration is the first administration, in my experience, has taken this super seriously. And so believe me, there's the eyes are out and the guard is up. But I expect that as long as this war goes on, there will be more incidents.
Mm-hmm. The unfortunate reality of the war with Iran. Now, I do want to pivot for a moment to Lebanon. You know, the big question right now on everyone's mind is how likely is it that Israel will expand its ground operation into Lebanon? We have seen the IDF send troops in, but it's short of a full-scale invasion. We're seeing Israeli tanks amassing at the border in the past 24 hours. Yossi, what's your take on this?
Well, I think one thing is clear. We have to make sure that we control the northern side of the border, just to make sure that the people living there on our side, in the communities in Israel's side of the border, will feel safe enough and confident that they can stay in their places while being bombarded by rockets, but not facing direct fire, not facing the potential incursion of Hezbollah operatives. So that's one thing we have to do. The other thing is to make sure that no Hezbollah is deployed in the villages of the south that are just in the next line northwards. And this is the area between the border and the Litani River. And we try to convince people to leave this area and to hit the bridges that connect the southern part of Lebanon with the northern part of Lebanon, so that Hezbollah will not be able to go there. But eventually we might have to move our troops there in order to make sure that this is really the case, because so far I've seen that some Hezbollah operatives are managing to infiltrate and penetrate into the south. In spite of our efforts and our control of the territory from the air, it's not enough. So we might have to move farther north. But this is only for local security purposes. The big picture is what's going to happen with Hezbollah in the northern part of Lebanon, in Beirut area, in the Bekaa Valley. And for that purpose, we hit them hard, but we have to rely eventually on the Lebanese army. We are not going to move with our ground forces to the Bekaa Valley or to Beirut. So we have to create the conditions that would convince the Lebanese army to handle this problem and come through on their promise to disarm Hezbollah. And for the time being, they are very hesitant. They say the right things, but they do nothing. And this has to change. And then a lot of American pressure should be applied on them in order to convince them to do something. So far, we are weakening Hezbollah, hoping that eventually they are going to be that weak that even the Lebanese army will feel that they can handle this problem.
Absolutely. So I could continue talking to you both for another hour about all the latest developments, but we are almost out of time. Colonel Rich Outzen and Brigadier General Yosef Cooper-Wasser, thank you both for joining us for this special weekend edition and for breaking down all of the latest coming out of the Middle East. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, Rich.
And to wrap up the hour, I just want to show once again the visuals of the strike on Dimona, the city in the south of Israel. At the top of the hour, we saw an Iranian ballistic missile hit. We see those visuals on the screen now. We're seeing some of the damages inflicted. We know a 10-year-old boy was severely injured. And that is the latest.